National Day of Resistance against unsafe school reopenings. Hey everybody, I am your host Elad. Today I'm reporting to you from downtown New York City. Hey everybody, I am your host Elad. Today I'm reporting to you from downtown New York City at... Can I help you? Hey everybody, I am your host Elad. Today we're reporting to you from downtown New York City at a protest to reopen. Can you get out of the camera way, bro? Can you get out of the way from the camera? You see what you're doing it on purpose though. You're getting in my way. No, you're getting in my way on purpose. Why are you getting in my way on purpose?
I'm standing still.
Why are you getting in my way on purpose? You're standing. All right, stand still over there. Hey everybody, I am your host Elad. Today I'm reporting to you from downtown New York City at a protest to keep the schools closed. Let's go talk to some folks, see what's going on. Hey, excuse me guys. Is there any chance I can get a quick interview? Yeah? Cool, so we're out here today, as I understand, protesting against reopening schools. Can you tell me a little bit more about,
This is a right-wing provocateur who's going to try and selectively edit this footage to discredit the protest.
Smash white supremacy on this. I'm not going to do it. Back up. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Hey guys, is there any chance I can get a quick interview?
What is it for?
I'm a YouTuber. I talk to people at different protests and stuff. I wanted to ask you about why you're out here today.
Okay, sure.
Cool. So we're out here today to protest against reopening schools. I'm not a right-wing extremist.
Edit what you say.
This is not true.
He shows up to lefty protests
Sure.
and try and discredit them.
Sure, yeah. This is fascism, by the way. Thank you so much for your time. New York was hit hard, but we're doing better now. So do you guys have any kind of, goal you want to reach for, low coronavirus spread in the state?
The thing is that while it did hit New York back in March, we also learned that because the city took a full week to decide whether to close schools or not, over 20,000 people got COVID-19 because of that decision. And the statistics show that. So because of that experience, we also know that haphazard reopening has real damaging effects for our communities.
Yeah. Can I follow up and ask you then, why do you think it's appropriate to hold a protest like this, a potential spreader for the virus, but then not be able to have open schools?
The science says that the virus is transmitted indoors in poorly ventilated areas, and has shown that being outdoors with proper PPE is safeguard enough where it's not going to spread the virus. And I think that the national revolt against racism since late May has proven that protests have not been the ones to spread the virus. It's been poor ventilation and in working conditions.
I know the average age for somebody who dies from coronavirus is about 80. The younger you are, the least vulnerable you are to the disease. So if the younger people are least vulnerable to this disease, why should we be shutting down the schools if not many kids in elementary, high school, or middle school die from this disease?
Well, very little is known about what's happening with young people in terms of what it does to their body, the coronavirus, but also all the adults that work in the schools account for, they also can transmit it to their own families. So we can't act like the teachers' teaching and working conditions are not the same as the students' learning conditions.
Absolutely. So maybe do you think we should consider just making the people who are immunocompromised, perhaps old teachers, just, have them maybe not come in, because we don't want to penalize these students, especially the underprivileged students. Missing out a school year like that is very bad. Rich people could afford tutors and things like that. So do you think maybe just holding back the old teachers might be a good alternative? Because again, average age of death for coronavirus is 80 years old.
Yeah, so the entire burden of this crisis is being put right now on teachers. Teachers are not the ones that fail to give the PPE. Teachers are not the ones who are not canceling the rents or the ones who are trying to cancel or reduce unemployment aid. None of this is the fault of teachers, yet the entire burden of this crisis is being put on schools because there's 2 million people in New York without food, 1 million people who don't have jobs. This is not the fault of teachers. It's because of this ineffective government that it would rather give Boeing $17 billion than to give schools the $13.5 billion. They gave the schools $13.5 billion in March for the stimulus package. So we can't act like it's on me and it's on us and it's on the entire school system to solve the problems of capitalism and these contradictions. So it's not on us, it's the city that has to do better.
Follow her for 1 second.
Yeah, sure thing.
This guy's kind of like a right-wing provocateur. So
Okay,
if he boxes you in, you don't have to engage.
Oh, thank you.
I recognize
Wait,
it.
why are you saying things like that? What if I said her...
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope you didn't think any...
Oh, no worries. I need water.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. you. Hey, excuse me, sir. Is there any chance I get a quick interview?
Say what?
Is there any chance I get a quick interview?
Sure.
So we're out here today to protest against.
Not a real journalist. He'll ask you
excuse-
leading questions and then.
I'm an independent reporter registered by the state. I'm registered by the state as independent.
Right-wing extremist.
Can we talk about why you're?
Are you a right-wing extremist?
Dude, how ridiculous is that, calling me an extremist? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Can you tell me more about why you're out here today at this protest? As I understand, you guys don't want to reopen the schools.
Edit this
Don't
video
bump me.
to discredit the protest.
I'm
So
not
if you
gonna do that.
support this movement, it's not a good idea to give him an interview.
Do you want to? Cool. So we're at a protest right now. We don't want to reopen the schools. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on out here?
A lot of people have gathered in support of the teachers union.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I understand, they don't want to reopen the schools. The average age of somebody who dies of coronavirus is 80. Do you think it makes a lot of sense to shut down these schools?
I'm not sure about the figures on who dies and who doesn't. You're saying the average age is 80?
Yeah. So it disproportionately affects old people and the immunocompromised. Children 18 and younger aren't very susceptible to the coronavirus. What do the conditions need to be for us to want to reopen these schools?
I don't know. I have friends that are suffering from coronavirus right now. They're not 80, right? They're in their 30s, right? 4 months, 120 days. Is that 4 months? Yeah. With horrendous symptoms and stuff like that. So if you're in a middle school or a high school, the classes are changing all the time. You're coming in contact with 20 or 30 different people depending on the size of the class. Every hour there's a change, right? So is there a chance of transmission? Is there a greater chance of transmission in that environment? Probably. Do you have to be 80 to suffer? No, you don't.
What do the conditions need to be for us to want to open these schools up? Because we can't keep them shut indefinitely, right?
There's other things we can do besides pack classrooms full of kids.
Sure.
So I think what's happening is people are demanding certain conditions for the schools to open.
Yeah. So
right?
I know we have large groups of people protesting out here today. Why is this okay to do, getting big groups to protest, but not have groups of students learning, in the classroom, maybe even potentially outdoors, if we, value education like that?
Why is this okay?
Why is this okay and schools aren't okay?
Well, this is a different situation than every day going into school. These protests, people aren't out here getting close and not social distancing like you and I aren't 6 feet apart.
I mean, in this crowd over here, people are definitely less than 6 feet apart.
Exactly.
It's a big crowd. Do you think that could contribute to the spread of coronavirus?
Of course.
Yeah. So why is this okay then, but not,
I didn't say it's okay.
Oh, okay.
It's not okay.
Do you think the Black
It's
Lives
not okay that we have to be out here.
Yeah.
Right?
I wanted to ask you, we're seeing a ton of Black Lives Matters protests. Do you think those contribute at all to the spread of coronavirus? We've been having a lockdown, but do you think it's okay to still permit those Black Lives Matters protests to go down?
I think you have to permit the people's First Amendment rights, yes. Sure. And we permit that all across the board and stuff like that.
Yeah. But don't we have freedom of expression for religion too, but we're still shutting down churches? We're not allowing churches for people to assemble in
I'm not
churches.
shutting down any churches.
Do you think churches should be open?
Are you shutting down churches?
De Blasio is, and Andrew Cuomo are saying we're not allowed to have people in church. Do you disagree with that?
I don't really have an opinion on that.
Nonsense. So, well, what do I think about it? I think that you got a bunch of college kids trying to tell you about life, talking about socialism, drinking, capitalism, drinking Starbucks coffee and shit. Yeah. So
they don't want to open those schools because they're saying it's a threat to the teachers there. What do you think about that?
Well, I have kids, and they need to open up schools because it's a threat to my my well-being and my wife having to go back to work and move on with her job and all that stuff. Yeah.
So I know the city's on lockdown, but we're still willing to have protests. What do you think it says about them if they're willing to organize like this, but they don't want to still have open schools and kids?
I think it's utterly ridiculous. Like anything else, it stinks with hypocrisy. but then that's the norm nowadays, isn't it, right?
So we have Cuomo and de Blasio. One's our governor, one's our mayor. How do you think they've dealt with the pandemic so far in New York?
I think that it's every day it becomes more and more ridiculous. First of all, let's not even talk about how they've dealt with it. They got put in a situation like everybody else, right? Nobody wants to hold Cuomo to the fire for what he did with the nursing homes. Let's start there. As far as de Blasio, what is de Blasio? Everybody hates him. You could be right wing, left wing, and everybody disapproves of his job. So I think that's.
I know one of the bigger things de Blasio just did was have this Black Lives Matters mural right in front of Trump Tower now.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Black Lives Matters movement now? I know they're also immune to the pandemic.
I don't think it has anything to do with Black Lives. Because if it did, they'd be marching every time a black child gets shot. It's a Marxist movement, the same thing that this is.
Unfortunately, this also affects disproportionately poor black children, right? Because these are public schools. But
No, listen, my kids go to public school too, and it's affecting them. My son has autism. I have a special needs son that's fallen behind drastically. So believe me, I'm really affected by this. It's bullshit.
it doesn't allow the parents to work either now because their kids.
Well, I got to go to work, but my wife not only lost her job, but guess what? She can't go out and get another job because we have to sit home with our kids who aren't getting schooling at home. That homeschooling stuff is all bullshit. My son, again, who was on the spectrum, is falling behind substantially. I mean, it's not right. On top of that, if you take a look at all countries in Europe and whatnot, take a look at Germany, all those kids have been back to school since May because they figured out that the kids don't pass it to adults.
Canada's open too. Canada's schools are open.
This is all nonsense.
Well, let me address some of this. So you mentioned, what do I think about Cuomo and de Blasio? Well, we had over 100,000 people die, most of them in New York, right? So that gives you the answer there.
100,000 people didn't die in New York.
No, I'm talking about
100,000, 150,000 in the U.S.
In
and
the
then
US,
like 20, 30,000
I'm
in
saying
New
most
York.
of the people that died were mostly in New York.
The nursing homes that he put the people back into.
But what I'm saying is that most of the negligence occur in New York. Firstly. Secondly, you have the Black Lives Matter protest, no social distancing. How many of those folks spread the virus? You have events like this. Where's the social distance here? 6 feet apart. I don't see this.
The hypocrisy of
and so
everything.
this is the hypocrisy that keeps going on. But if this were a red state, if we had Donald Trump having a rally here, that would be an issue, right? But when it's something that is supported by Cuomo, it's not an issue. When it's something that is promoted by the liberal agenda, it's not an issue. And so that is what's happening in America, not only in New York City, but in America, and particularly in the liberal states like New York.
Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Cool. We're good.
Just to let you know, he's a right-wing extremist.
Is he really?
He will
Did you hear my interview? I am not a right-wing extremist. I'm certified by the state right here. Extremist, he calls me.
Kind of leftist protests, and then selectively edit them to make people look
So
bad.
are you following him around to let
He's
people know
well
this?
known in New York City. He does this.
Well, here's my
Organizers-
credentials, and you heard many of my questions that I just spoke to this gentleman. If you don't want to have an interview with me, that's fine. Can I show you my info? I just want to show you how defensive and crazy this
A
is.
lot of people. Sure.
Can I show you though on Instagram? I'll show you my stuff.
Hey, fuck off. Fuck off.
What do you mean fuck off?
Fuck off.
I'm chilling, bro. What do you mean fuck off?
We're telling you to shut the fuck up. Stop talking to us.
I'm not talking to you, bro. You fuck off. Where are you coming from?
Coming from right here.
Oh, I'm literally on the street. I'm pressed. What's wrong? What are you doing?
Leave him alone. He's not doing anything.
Yeah, what's your issue, bro? If she didn't want to talk to me, she'd back away. All right, cool. All right, that's great.
being aggressive. He just asked me.
Why do you feel the need to like step up to me like this? What do you mean, no? Why are you like stepping up? All right, real tough.
Guys, just get out of here. You're not wanted here. Move.
No one by who?
You're leaving. Everyone else here, just leave.
Do you own the sidewalk?
No, we just need to get out of here.
Do you own the
No,
sidewalk?
no one's saying
I'm
on the sidewalk, but
staying
get
here.
out of here. You're not welcome here. Leave.
You move me.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
They staying right here. They're doing their
Latinos
job.
are welcome here. People who support the cause are welcome here. You're not welcome
You
here.
gotta.
People who harass women are
everyone
not
here
welcome
is
here.
He's not harassing anyone.
People who harass women harassers are not welcome
He
here.
isn't-
Please leave.
He's not harassing anyone.
Just start making stuff up. And now chuckle because you have nothing to say. You're a clown,
Exactly.
bro.
You're a buffoon.
See, this is what you guys do. You bait people and then put it on the internet.
No,
You just came up trying to intimidate me. You and your three buddies just came through and trying to intimidate me. Now you're trying to flip it up on me, or what?
Leave. I won't do anything,
leave.
but please leave.
Make sure they don't fuck
Leave.
with anything.
No, please leave. Please leave. Excuse me, sir. Is there any chance I get a quick interview?
Sure, where are you with?
I'm independent.
Okay.
Cool.
I just want to let you know he's a right-wing provocateur. He supports Trump. He shows up to liberal rallies and selectively edits footage to try and discredit them. So I want you to know that. Your choice whether or not you speak to him.
Who do you publish for?
Yeah. So I'm independent. I post all my stuff on YouTube. This was everything he told you was a lie. I understand if you don't want to talk to me. I just wanted to ask why you're out protesting today. You know, you have a sign that says New York bets demand safe schools. Why do you have the sign out here?
The schools need to be ventilated. They need to have funding for PPE, contact tracing, and rolling testing to make sure that nobody's infected. The schools that have opened already on Friday in Georgia, Indiana, they have cases, hundreds of people quarantining on the first day of school. Summer schools all over the country have shut down because of cases.
What do the conditions need to be for us to want to reopen the schools in New York?
How about like other countries, 0 new cases?
Well, in Canada, they reopened their schools in Canada. They don't have no new cases, so it's different standards, you know, in different places.
Right. Well, if countries can do 0 cases, then we can do it. Why can't we do it? We have more money than any country on earth.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, we're at a protest here today. There's many people here gathered. Why should we be able to protest like this and not be able to go to school?
Because this is outdoors. And matter of fact, could you just stand like 2 feet further back? I appreciate that. The virus seems to have spread in a summer school where 3 teachers were indoors and they were taking turns standing in front of the camera. 1 teacher died, the other 2 tested positive. So these are just examples of what can happen. And you know, we could open schools, but it's taking a chance. Would you want your mom or your aunt or somebody that you know that was a teacher to be the one to die?
Well, let me tell you, the average age of the people who die from coronavirus is 80 years old. So if they were immunocompromised or of old age, I wouldn't want them in the schools. But, you know, this doesn't really affect or really kill people or have a high mortality rate with younger students. So anybody under 18 isn't really, you know, that susceptible to coronavirus. Do you think maybe we should take out the teachers who are immunocompromised or like over the age of 65 who prove to be especially susceptible to coronavirus?
Well, it's nice to see that you could agree on that. So let's agree on that, but that's 20% of the workforce.
Sure.
And we don't have the funding to replace 20% of the workforce in 3 weeks. There, you know, nationwide, that would be about 600,000 people that need to be trained in 3 weeks.
Is that better than, though, no schools? I mean, is it between 80% or nothing at all? I mean, I know this is particularly going to be affecting underprivileged and poor students because the rich students could still afford, you know, tutors and have their parents at home and continue with that. So,
well, the underprivileged parents are the ones more likely to want remote learning because they're the ones that are impacted the most. If you go up to Scarsdale or Chappaqua and they want to open up schools, that's fine with me. They have the funding to do whatever they want. But here, you know, put your money where your mouth is. Trump just said yesterday that he doesn't like the way that these cities are run in Portland and Chicago and New York City, so he doesn't feel like giving the money. What if you're a kid that has nothing to do with politics, right? So that's you know, that's not equal protection under the law. You know, it's just bad leadership from the top down.
Do you think, are you happy with how de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo have been handling this pandemic so far?
Could you just step 2 feet back? Andrew Cuomo obviously made mistakes. De Blasio obviously made mistakes. And we don't know because they're not revealing whether or not they're going to open up schools until the last second.
I know studies show that online classes aren't nearly as effective as like in-person classes. So what do you think the conditions would be for it to be safe for us to still have like in-school learning with the teachers and the students, kind of back to what we had before the pandemic, or maybe in schools with masks? What are the correct conditions for that to occur?
After what we've seen in states where schools have opened and cases have risen, we know that a full opening of all schools is out of the question for September. So what many of us are suggesting is that in-person school be opened only for our most vulnerable students. For example, our IEP students have been having a really hard time getting their needs met in the virtual space. So we're thinking about things like what it would look like to have our special needs students exclusively have access to the school so that they can get the services that they need that they cannot get online.
What are the conditions? I saw online you guys posted 14 days of no new cases in the state, which is an extremely high standard. I know in Canada they reopened their schools. So what are the standards? Because I know deaths are going down in New York. After the beginning of the pandemic, we had like 20,000 some odd deaths, but after that, we're doing kind of well now. So what are the conditions to need to reopen these schools?
Well, because our public schools are woefully underfunded and the education budget has been slashed again, what we're really looking for is a guarantee of funding so that we can ensure that we have the cleaning supplies that we need, the custodial staff that we need hired and employed and paid well, hazard pay for our teachers who are willing to go back in, and also things like PPE, disinfectant supplies, gloves, the basic things that we all have come to, it's second nature now because we've been doing this thing for 4 months.
I know we've also been seeing that the coronavirus is particularly deadly for older people. The average age of the person who died in the United States is around 80. So given that schools are mostly, they have young children in them, people under 18, why not open these schools if they're not particularly vulnerable to the coronavirus? Again, this is particularly deadly for older people.
The thing about coronavirus that I think we're forgetting is that although elderly people are vulnerable, so are Black and brown people, which comprise almost 70% of our public school system. And even though our students may not get sick as often, our students carry the virus home. So they carry it to those elderly relatives. They carry it to those immunocompromised teachers and other people in the community that I don't think we're thinking about in a way that's important.
Should we potentially just isolate them, potentially to still help these students, because the kids who aren't going to school, especially these poor and underprivileged students, they're the ones who are particularly harmed by this, because the rich kids, they can get tutors and such. But don't you think it would be a better idea to send these kids back to school and then maybe isolate the particularly vulnerable? Again, the average age for the person who died from the coronavirus is 80, so this isn't hurting young people. Even young Black and brown people aren't being harmed that badly from the coronavirus.
I'd like to push back on that because I know a third grader who was hospitalized for 7 days in Brooklyn, in my District 14. And I'd also like to point out that many Black and brown parents are not comfortable sending their children to school, not because they necessarily think they're going to be sick, although that's an issue, but also because they don't believe that given the underfunding they are already used to, that there will be measures in place that will keep their children safe. And we reject the notion that we need to open up schools to serve marginalized students when our leaders are not giving those marginalized students the tools that they need to succeed. Don't use us as a talking point now when you haven't funded the schools for decades. That's not right.
I wanted to follow up because, again, the closing of the schools is kind of in the same vein of our lockdown that we continue to have going on. So what do you make of this lockdown? Should we be allowing, restaurants to open? Because, our restaurants on the streets here are kind of open. So if we're going to close the schools, do you think we should still have those things open?
I think that schools, because our schools are so overcrowded, which is another piece of it, right? It's one thing to open a cafe and have all the seats up so no one can sit down. It's something completely different to have small children who haven't got to see each other for months be expected not to touch each other, to keep masks on for hours, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're really just thinking about what is developmentally appropriate for these kids. Because if they're not going back to the school that they love, this argument of let's get them back to school so they can feel better kind of is null and void.
I want to ask you one last quick question. Are you scared that the protests that we see going on are potentially spreading the coronavirus? Maybe not even particularly this one, but we've been seeing many Black Lives Matter protests. Are you scared that might also be spreading the virus, and should the lockdowns be allowing those protests?
Protest is a constitutional right, so of course, and we've already seen data that proves that the protests are not spreading the virus because we're outside. We do our best to wear masks and social distance. I have been attending the protests. As you can see, I am healthy, and I think the real issue is these enclosed spaces. And so when we think about public schools that don't have air conditioners, that have broken windows, the issue
Could we do
clear.
schooling outside then?
I don't know what that would look like in communities where there are already safety issues. I don't know that would look like when our teachers are being excessed and we don't have the personnel to watch students. I don't know what safety protocols become when you're outside and any adult on the street can interact with our kids. So despite the scientific evidence that might be safer, there are concerns that we have as parents and teachers.
Thank you so much. It's just...